Welcome to the WRAL Daily Download. I'm Elizabeth Holmes. New data from the Environmental Protection Agency shows PFAS, also known as forever chemicals, are showing up in more drinking water systems across the country, including here in North Carolina. These chemicals could be putting more than 172 million Americans at risk, and utilities across our state are working to remove them. WRAL climate reporter Liz McLaughlin has been digging into this. Hi, Liz.
For a few years now. Hi, Elizabeth.
Yes, it's been a while. So you should be able to answer this question first. What even are forever chemicals and where do they come from?
So if you've been watching WRAL, you've probably seen us cover this. But for people who aren't familiar, or maybe you've heard of the term, they're basically toxic synthetic chemicals, and they've been used since the 1940s. So they've been around for a while, found in nonstick cookware, stain-resistant fabrics, firefighting foam, food packaging, waterproof cosmetics, all sorts of stuff. They don't break down easily in the environment or in our bodies, so that's why they're called forever chemicals. And rainwater, wastewater, industrial discharges move this PFAS, these chemicals, into rivers, lakes, reservoirs, sources for public drinking water. And in North Carolina, a major hotspot for contamination of these chemicals, Moore's Fayetteville Works facility is one of the big sources. They discharge various PFAS, including Gen X, into the Cape Fear River for decades, and that made the drinking water downstream contaminated.
And I'm sure people hearing that are probably thinking, oh my gosh, hearing a forever chemical, what does that do if someone drinks it? Why are they such a health problem?
So we've had more, there are actually tens of thousands of different kinds of PFAS. So some of the most researched ones have now been phased out, but called forever chemicals, they're still showing up even though they haven't really been used for 50 years. But the way our system works, you don't have to prove something is safe to start using it. You have to prove that it's dangerous to stop using it. And it's near impossible to have a deep level of research on all of those thousands of chemicals. But from what we know, and the more and more we know from these studies, the more dangerous it seems they are, even at very small amounts. They've been linked to cancer, immune suppression, reproductive and developmental harm, and even reduced vaccine effectiveness. So it can affect all these different aspects. And the biggest cause, I think, or the biggest concern for public health problems is when it's in your drinking water because you're just getting so much of it. You know, on your waterproof eyeliner, maybe you have a small interaction, but it is detected in the blood of 99% of Americans, including newborns. And the way the EPA measures it is in these tiny concentrations, parts per trillion. So if you can imagine a tiny droplet of water in, a dozen Olympic-sized pools. You know, that's the level that we're talking about, parts per trillion. Some of these levels are at 4 parts per trillion. So this is really small that can be concerning for safety.
And you've kind of already mentioned this, but again, it seems like it's popping up here in North Carolina. What are maybe some spots in North Carolina that we're seeing this?
So a lot of the people in the Fayetteville area, because of Chemours, and then the Wilmington area downstream, really this has been on the forefront of their minds because private wells, their drinking water has been contaminated and it's just so close to home. But I think where more and more people are being surprised is just how ubiquitous it is in our system and now in our waste stream. So we're learning that more and more drinking water systems are contaminated. And the EPA has been releasing data slowly but surely, and we're just learning more and more and more systems are contaminated. This last data release, 200 more systems were added, and that included several in North Carolina. The city of Durham is one of them, and their PFAS levels of their finished water hover around those new limits. Some test results under, some over, but people could still be getting more than what the EPA considers a safe level out of their tap right now. Orange County, that serves, or OWASA is the utility name that serves Chapel Hill and Carborough. their raw water levels, so before treatment, is like 60 to 80 parts per trillion in some of the most dangerous and research compounds. They are using treatment, though, that's bringing that finished water down to below the level. Apex and Carey are also using the same one that OWASA is. It's called powdered activated carbon, and it looks kind of like charcoal, right? This black powdery mixture they mix in there with it that's able to get the PFAS out. So again, many of these drinking water systems have been able to recognize or test to discover it's a problem, and now they're finding ways to treat it. But there's not an easy solution because this powder activated carbon that they use creates another waste stream. So they're able to get the PFAS out, but then what? Now they have these, they call it residual solids. They have this PFAS waste that they're sending to make someone else's problem. Usually it's either burned or buried in landfills. And then back into the environment, back into our drinking water, yada, yada. It's just an endless cycle. And the baffling part for a lot of people is that while the EPA, this started under Biden's EPA, is working to have a drinking water standard, take it out of the drinking water, there's no limit on how much an industry can discharge it into the environment or if it shows up in consumer products. Because maybe, after you hear about this podcast, you might say, oh, I don't really want the dental floss with PFAS in it. The toilet paper, yes, it exists with PFAS in it, or the makeup, but there's not a label on those products.
Wow, a lot of unknowns. We'll be right back. All right, we're back. You mentioned kind of the different ways that different jurisdictions are trying to tackle this. Something that you reported on, too, was that it could be costly to try to tackle these problems, too.
Yeah, that's right. There's really no cheap solution. The reason they're so effective at repelling water on your rain jacket or making that mascara last all day is because it's just a really tight bond, so it's hard to break apart. And like I said, most North Carolina utilities have been relying on that powdered activated carbon, which can be a little cheaper because you don't really have to set up a huge footprint or infrastructure to do it. You kind of mix it in, get it out. But a lot of them are like it's a short-term solution for most because especially in Orange County where they have a lot of contamination from sewage sludge being applied to fields and getting into a reservoir. That's a whole nother topic we could do a podcast about. That they're going to use granular activated carbon, so a GAC filter. Now, this has already been installed in Wilmington and costs about $42 million for them to put up, but then it's millions of dollars each year to maintain it. And again, you have that waste problem with what do you do with the filters afterwards. So a couple places are going to do that. Fayetteville's estimates, I think, were over $100 million. So, and this, by the way, is going on ratepayers' bills. Your water bills will likely pay for cleaning this up, not the companies who made it or put it there, including Chemours in our backyard in Fayetteville. An interesting thing that Apex and Carey are doing is this company called Invicta Water is doing a pilot, and basically they use, I'll try not to get too technical, but these crystals and UV light that actually breaks it up and is able to destroy the PFAS without a harmful byproduct. It's really promising. They're still working on getting it to scale and everything. But so far, the pilots that I've seen and been reporting on as they've developed over the past couple of years have been working. So that could be an option that's a little cheaper.
Your reporting says that there are federal levels and limits about how much PFAS can be in drinking water. It seems like there's still a lot of unknowns surrounding PFAS itself, but there are some limits. But your reporting also suggested that those limits might change.
It's a lot in flux right now. And if you've been following the Trump administration and Lee Zeldin's EPA, there's really a move here towards deregulation. They're really pushing for, giving businesses, they call regulations, unnecessary strain on businesses or unnecessary cost for businesses and sometimes stifling innovation. But what that means is a lot of these things are in flux. And the EPA only recently finalized those, they call them drinking water standards, so limits this is how much you can have in your drinking water systems. And I will say it's not perfect, because if you're looking, at a city like Raleigh, sure, they can invest to have this filter. But in a rural area that's not serving many customers, this is a lot of money to go to a few people. It could be not feasible or just super expensive. So, there are some challenges, even just getting enough carbon, right? Or things like that. There would be challenges to meeting that, but a lot of people say this is an important first step, because at the end of the day, there's still millions of Americans drinking water with toxic chemicals in them right now in America. That's a problem. But the current EPA is considering, or said that they plan to roll back the enforceable limits for some of those PFAS compounds, including Gen X, which is the one, you may have heard that word before. That's the one that Chemours made, dumped into the Cape Fear River for decades, and is specific to them. So that's one that we're really dealing with here. And if a utility had only that, really high concentrations of only that one, and they take away this limit on that compound, even though there's still a couple more PFAS on there, they just wouldn't get the filtration system. So boom, you'd still be exposed. And you might hear, like I said, Durham is over the limit. Well, how can that be? They're not breaking the law. This was a recent standard, and they're giving utilities time to comply. Some people say it's too much time. Right now, the deadline is 2029, but the EPA is signaling that they want to delay that until 2031. So that's even more time. In the meantime, that means, families, viewers I've talked to say, my grandmother, my baby, my sick spouse is drinking that water.
I guess final questions for you is, how can people find out what is in their water? And is there anything that people can do to protect themselves from this?
Sure. So that's a really important first step, knowing what's in your water. And most utilities have been testing for this for a long time. Even Aqua NC is one of the kind of community well systems. They also, and all of the utilities I've found have some testing data, some more recent than others, online. So you can go to your most recent water quality report, go to your utility website, and find it if you're on public water. If you have a well, you may have to get that tested. There's a kind of over-the-counter do-it-yourself kit that's not too expensive, $80. CycloPure is one option. Some are more expensive, some are slower, but there's lots of options to just test it yourself too, which you can do out of the tap. So it's a good first step. See how much you have. It's very common. So it's likely that you might have something in there, but it might not be over the limit. So it's a little bit of alphabet soup, but Environmental Working Group, a nonprofit advocacy organization, kind of combined it all in a easy to read way and tells you what it means. So they have a database that's also really handy. So those are good ways to just see where you're at. Now, if you're over or you're just concerned, even maybe before you get the test, the good news is that even those pitcher filters, refrigerator filters can take at least some of it out. And most of them, if you're looking for it specifically, can take the majority of it out. So that's a cheap way, kind of a short term. But you got to remember to change that filter, because if you're getting all the PFAS out and then your filter's really old and you have a bacterial problem, you still have a problem. There's also some more expensive options that might be more permanent solutions, reverse osmosis, and a full home GAC or granular activated carbon filter. But that can be thousands of dollars.
Interesting. I wonder what Brita sales are going to look like maybe after someone listens to this podcast. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? Anything else that you learned?
I think the big kind of wrap up is just that the PFAS contamination is widespread but solvable, especially if we can stop it at the source. Utilities are investing heavily to stay below those federal limits, and a lot of the utilities I talk to really they're saying, hey, your water's safe to drink. Most utilities are already complying with those limits, finding ways to do it, especially in urban areas like in our viewing area, but some are still figuring it out.
All right, Liz. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, and thank you for listening to the WRAL Daily Download. If you've listened to this podcast on WRAL.com or the WRAL News app, you can also find it in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. Follow the show so you don't miss an episode.